What's going on, guys? I hope you're all having a wonderful day today. For those of you that are new to the channel, my name is Ty, and today in this video, I am severely sunburned. I don't know if you guys could tell from like the lighting or whatever, but I am going through it. I had a bad day at the beach yesterday. Wear your sunblock, kids. But listen, regardless, I want to talk about whether or not movies generally are getting worse. Now listen, the reason that I'm bringing this up is because some of you might relate to what I'm about to say. Let's just say you're at a Christmas party, you're at the 4th of July celebration, unless, you're not in the US, I guess you don't know what that is really. And you're just talking to some older people, maybe, your uncle, your dad, your grandpa, and he hits you with this sentence, this saying: they don't make any good movies anymore. I'm sure some of you have heard this. It's like this boomer argument that people are always talking about how every movie that comes out now is just bad. Oh, the quality of films is depleting. They don't make the Shawshank Redemption or Jurassic Park anymore. No, they make just bad blockbusters. Is there actually any substance to that argument? Are movies actually getting worse as time goes on, as we just progress into the future? My answer to that question can be answered perfectly by Jordan Belfort.
Absolutely fucking not.
Every single time that I hear people talk about how movies are always just getting worse, now it's just a bunch of corporate slop, there's no great directors anymore, no good actors, they don't have movie stars anymore in this day and age, it's just a boomer argument. This is something that like 40, 50, 60 and plus year olds talk about just because they don't have the same nostalgic feeling that we're currently going through and, just enjoying the films that are coming out. Listen, I do understand that there is some validity to their argument, which I'm going to get to in a second here, but the reality is movies, I would argue, are only getting better, if not remaining just as good. I actually want to start out here by defending these people's takes that movies are only getting worse because, again, like I already said, I think that what they're saying is slightly valid. But to an extent, I'm pretty much just playing devil's advocate, which is a phrase that I think is just so nerdy whenever it's used in arguments, but whatever. Technically, at this point in time, there has never been more bad movies made. That's a fact. Statistically, there has never been more horrible movies made than at this point in time in 2024. However, something that people seem to overlook for a reason that I just cannot comprehend is the fact that there have never been more movies being made. Like the total amount of films being made from right now compared to even just like the 2000s or the 90s or the 80s and so on. When you go on Letterboxd, I'll probably put up like, a couple pictures here. It shows the total amount of movies from decades, but that doesn't mean that the quality of movies is getting worse. Just a stupid argument. The second point that honestly I can't say I disagree with, and it is the reality, is that as time goes on, it feels like we are starting to get more like corporate made films, more sequels, the biggest offender of this being Disney, where every single movie it feels like they put out, it's either a live action remake or a sequel. It's just the point of all these, adaptations and sequels and less original ideas that end up being really bad or just feel cheap or lazy. That I can honestly get behind because, again, there's more of those being made right now than at any point in history. But honestly, most of them do end up being pretty bad, so I can understand that point. There were a lot more original films being made in, the 90s, maybe the 80s, the 70s. But that's just because filmmaking was, a lot younger compared to right now. I mean, think about how far film has come from a CGI standpoint, from a writing standpoint, how much there was to learn from the past of filmmaking. It's most potent right now. There's so much that you could look back on and learn from the history of filmmaking. But I just want to move on into my argument as to why movies are not getting worse. Now listen, obviously it's pretty tough to, get a grasp at, how can we tell if all movies are getting better, staying the same, or getting worse? But I just want to give my best analysis of the current market of films and as Hollywood as a whole, and just go over why I feel like Hollywood is just as alive as it's ever been. Even though there's been some bumps in the road recently, which I will talk about in a second, it just seems like people are just as interested in movies as they've ever been, and we're still getting high quality products. When I look back at the past couple of years, things have been pretty rough, especially in the past half of a decade. We had the pandemic, which I know at this point, people are so over about hearing about. I don't even want to talk about it anymore. It's over at this point, okay? But the pandemic seriously affected all movies in 2020, except for maybe, January, February, halfway through March. But those are like the worst times for movies, those 3 months of the year. And of course, 2021, even into 2022, I'd argue that, 2023 was a year that wasn't really affected by the pandemic. Maybe things were moved into 2023, but, things were pretty much back on track. Then, right in the middle of 2023, we get the writers and actors strike, which seriously affected the back half of 2023 and even this year, 2024. It's been rough. Not everything has been completely smooth sailing. However, even during these hardships, during these tough times, we managed to still get some of the greatest films of all time. Whether it's in Oppenheimer, which some people are saying is Christopher Nolan's best movie, one of the best movies ever made practically. I personally wasn't the biggest fan of it, but I'm just not a big history biopic type of person. Dune 2 just came out. Apparently, one of the greatest sci-fi films ever made. I also absolutely loved it. I'm just throwing my opinions in here because, it's my channel, so why not? I loved that film. Cinema is more alive than ever. Of course, just like, how there was the roaring 20s and in the 80s, all these cheap action films, we also have our new genre, which currently I would say is, and I think is pretty undisputable, superhero films. That's what the 2010s and the 2020s have been about. The quality has dropped, sure, but there's still these things that people want to see. They're very interesting, and they're still being made, some of them at least, at a very high level. You look at Infinity War, Endgame, Across the Spider-Verse, which I believe is literally like one of the best superhero films ever made. You're getting high quality entertainment, and like I already said, in the 2010s, I feel like everything was pretty much smooth sailing. There wasn't too many bumps in the road. Then 2020s, we get nailed with the pandemic, nailed with the writers and actors strike, and things are still going pretty well considering how much, cinema has been through realistically. I mean, it's pretty much, trying to recover still to this day. When it comes to the people that are actually making these films as well, whether they're behind the camera, like a director, or in front of the camera, like an actor, they're still just as popular as ever. You've got all the old blood like Scorsese, Spielberg, even Nolan, who's been doing this for 20 years now, Villeneuve, who's been, on fire recently, especially with Dune 2 just coming out. All these older directors that have always been popular are still making high quality films, some of the best of their careers, while also sort of passing the torch onto these new directors that are just consistently making really great films. In the horror genre, you've got Jordan Peele absolutely killing it. You've got people like Luca, who just made Challengers, absolutely phenomenal director. A bunch of other people that I really enjoy their style, whether it's someone like Gareth Edwards, or just, there's too many to even name. Regardless, you've got a ton of new blood, and they are just killing it, and I love to see that. Moving on from there, talking about the stars, there's been this argument about how there aren't movie stars anymore. There isn't that Brad Pitt or that Leonardo DiCaprio, even though they're still working. I understand what they're talking about, referring more to, the 80s or the 90s with, a Keanu Reeves or a Patrick Swayze. But I think that argument is completely wrong for one reason. Again, like I already mentioned like practically 5 times, we've been in this weird period the past half of a decade where we had all these things going on. But I picture it more as a transitional period, a period where torches are being passed to the new generation. And I think that since it was a bit of an awkward time, it was a good time to see new blood sort of rise from the depths. Whether that's arguably the #1 star in the world right now, Timothée Chalamet, who's practically becoming a household name at this point, not just because of his popularity, but because of how wonderful of an actor he is. I mean, his performance in Dune 2 was unbelievable. Also, you've got a ton of actors where it just feels like their momentum is just at an all-time high right now. Whether it's Glenn Powell, where it seems like he's in everything, and also he has so many projects on the back burner right now for the next couple of years. Ryan Gosling, who's been killing it recently. Yeah, he's been around for a while, but he's pretty much at his peak right now. He's unbelievable. Zendaya has been moving forward with her acting career. She's an absolutely fantastic actor. It's just amazing that after this rough period, like I already said, we have all these actors starting to really emerge and solidifying themselves as our next generation of actors, as our next A-listers that people will know and everyone could talk about and that are going to be in like everything. I think that's so great. I really love that. The last thing that I want to talk about here, which technically is the most important thing, is about audiences. Our audiences are people, everyday people willing to still go to the cinema to go see that next movie that's coming out. Is audience attention being lowered? Are people just not as interested in movies anymore? Guys, the answer to that question is absolutely not. This is something that I feel like is just being pushed because now with streaming services, oh, you could just sit in your house all day and watch movies by just clicking your remote and right there, bang, you got thousands of movies at your disposal. You could play whatever you want, no big deal. I would highly disagree because of 2 reasons that happened just recently. The first and most obvious reason is Barbenheimer. Guys, less than a year ago, Barbie and Oppenheimer came out on the same weekend, and it was literally like an unbelievable phenomenon. Literally everyone and their mom was excited to see this Barbenheimer thing come to life. People were dressing up. People were talking about which movie are you going to see first? Which one are you more excited about? It was such an exciting cultural event. And I think that that shows cinema is still alive. The second reason, is a little bit more of a slept-on reason in my opinion, is Avatar: The Way of Water. I know that might sound a little bit crazy. That movie just made like $2 billion, one of the highest grossing films of all time, and it's an Avatar film. General audiences love to go to the movies. As much as all these streaming services are trying to, get down your throat and steal your money from you, basically, I'm telling you, general audiences love the movies. Top Gun Maverick made $1.5 billion. Oppenheimer, an R-rated biopic, almost made $1 billion. Barbie just made $1.5 billion. Dune 2 just made a ton of money, like $700 million. I'm telling you, audiences are still interested in films as long as they're being made, to an interesting degree and we have original ideas coming out. Movies are not getting worse. This is a fake argument. If anything, they're only getting better. I'm going to be honest with you. I'll be the first one to admit, and this might be, a personal thing here. I think that 2024 is looking to be a pretty weak year for films, if I'm just going to be real. Like, I'm not really super interested in movies that are coming out this year. Sure, I know that a lot of, more exciting films come out towards the back half of the year, especially as we get into that Oscar season. However, this is looking like a weaker year, even with something like Dune 2. I think that 2025 and into the last, half of this decade, we're going to be getting some really good films once we stop feeling, the aftershocks of something like the writer's strike and the pandemic. Once that's all said and done, I cannot be more excited for the rest of this decade. Movies are alive and well. This is absolute cinema. Guys, that's just going to be my argument today. Don't listen to these old people. Prove them wrong. Movies are more exciting than they've ever been. I'm telling you. There's nothing wrong with looking back at older films, and I don't even mean, 100 years old. I'm saying the 2010s, 2000s, 90s, 80s, 70s, and appreciating those films, which is why it bothers me when older people can't appreciate the new films that are coming out today. It's pretty stupid. It feels like a double standard that isn't really working out, but who cares? The next generation is alive and well, baby. Thank you guys for watching this video. I love you guys, and I will see you in the next video.